Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Message. Maxwell Reeves studied the blueprints spread across his desk. The angular lines of the luxury high-rise he was designing reflected in his steel-rimmed glasses. At 45, Max had built Sovereign Structures into one of Denver's premier architectural firms through ruthless precision and unwavering focus. His phone vibrated against the polished mahogany. He ignored it until he finished marking his revisions. When he finally checked, the voicemail from his wife Natalie made his hand still. "Christmas is off. Expect a call from my lawyer. 10 years of marriage dismissed in 11 words." Max replayed it twice, noting the background noise, the distinct ambient music of Vero's, an upscale restaurant downtown. Natalie hadn't gone to her sister's as she'd claimed. He set the phone down and returned to his blueprints. After 30 minutes of meticulous work, he drafted a single text: "Understood." That evening, Max drove his Audi R8 past the sprawling Mountain View estate he'd designed himself. The property he'd paid for. The home where Natalie had insisted on hosting lavish parties for her artistic circle, introducing him to people like Brandon Webb, the sculptor whose studio she'd been supporting with increasing frequency. Inside, he went straight to his office, a space Natalie rarely entered. He unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk, extracting a leather portfolio. Inside were contingency plans he'd begun assembling 6 months ago when he first noticed the changes in Natalie. The new clothes, the late nights, the scent of unfamiliar cologne. Max hadn't built his empire by being naive. He'd hired Leona Martinez, a former FBI agent turned private investigator. Her reports confirmed his suspicions. Natalie and Brandon had been having an affair for nearly 8 months. More concerning were their recorded conversations planning to liberate Max from half his assets. "You deserve the house," Brandon had told her. "We can squeeze him for more." Max poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon and opened his laptop. He accessed their mortgage documents through his secure server. The property was valued at $3.2 million, with $320,000 remaining on the mortgage. Natalie had insisted on being on the deed for appearance's sake, but had contributed nothing financially. After a series of calls to his attorney Damon Wright and his banker, Max executed the documents that would legally remove his name from the mortgage, transferring full responsibility to Natalie. The paperwork had been prepared months ago, requiring only his final authorization. Done. Max took another sip of bourbon, remembering when he'd met Natalie at a charity gala 11 years ago. He'd been captivated by her vibrant presence, her seemingly genuine interest in architecture, her tales of growing up modestly in Minnesota. He'd believed her when she said she wasn't like the gold diggers who often pursued him. He'd believed her when she said she loved him for himself, not his wealth or status. He'd believed her until the evidence proved otherwise. Max's phone vibrated with a text from Leona. "Subjects have reservations at the Halcyon Hotel tonight. Former colleague at reception will grant access to room after departure." "Proceed." Max replied. "Proceed." He finished his bourbon and went to bed, alone in the master suite. Tomorrow would be the first day of Natalie's education on the consequences of betrayal. Chapter 2. The Awakening. 48 hours after removing his name from the mortgage, Max's phone erupted with notifications. 67 missed calls, 29 voicemails, 43 text messages, most from Natalie, some from numbers he didn't recognize, and 3 from Web Studio. Max swiped them all away and continued his meeting with Denver's Urban Development Committee. His latest project, a sustainable mixed-use complex, would revitalize a neglected neighborhood and cement Sovereign Structures' reputation for innovative design. As you can see, Max concluded his presentation, the Meridian project creates affordable housing while generating significant tax revenue. The committee voted unanimously to approve. Max shook hands with the commissioners, ignoring the persistent vibration in his pocket. Outside City Hall, Max found Damon Wright waiting beside his Tesla. "She's in full panic mode," Damon said, falling into step beside Max. "Her lawyer called me 5 times this morning. And, as instructed, I explained that while you're willing to discuss divorce proceedings, the mortgage issue is between Mrs. Reeves and her bank." Damon's thin lips curved upward. "The bank's foreclosure notice arrived yesterday. They're demanding immediate payment or refinancing. And since her only income comes from the art gallery, that's actually a money-losing tax write-off." Precisely. She can't qualify for refinancing. Not with her credit history. Max remembered discovering Natalie's credit report early in their relationship. How she'd tearfully confessed to financial mistakes in her youth. He'd paid off her $42,000 in debt as a wedding gift. She'd sworn she'd changed. What about Webb? Max asked. Struggling artist is accurate, for once, Damon replied. His finances are worse than hers. He sold 2 sculptures last year for a total of $27,000. His studio lease alone is $5,000 monthly, which I've been funding through Natalie's art endowment, Max noted coldly. They reached Max's Audi. Damon handed him a thick envelope. The preliminary asset division proposal they filed this morning. They're asking for half of everything. The house, your company shares, investment portfolios. They claim she was instrumental to your success. Max took the envelope without opening it. And the recordings? Admissible in the settlement negotiations, though Colorado's no-fault divorce laws still apply. But the conspiracy angle changes things. Their explicit discussions about defrauding you constitute conspiracy to commit theft. Max's phone vibrated again. Natalie. She just found out about the Aspen property being solely in your name, Damon explained. And the frozen credit lines. Max had purchased the Aspen Ski Lodge 3 years ago as a surprise for Natalie, intentionally keeping it in his name despite her suggestions to add her to the deed. The Amex Centurion card she'd been using to furnish it and fund her shopping sprees had been disabled yesterday. What about her son? Max asked. Dylan remains employed at your Seattle office, unaware of current events. Dylan Hayes had been 17 when Max married Natalie. Despite initial resistance, he'd eventually accepted Max's offer to join Sovereign Structures after college. Max had mentored him, promoted him, treated him like family. Now, according to Leona's surveillance, Dylan was helping his mother and Brandon with their scheme, providing internal company information. Schedule the meeting for tomorrow, Max said. My office, 2 p.m. As Damon departed, Max's phone vibrated with a text from a different source. Leona. Package secured. Video and financial documentation exceed expectations. They've been busy. Max allowed himself a small smile as he started his car. The chess pieces were moving exactly as he'd anticipated. Chapter 3. The Revelation. The conference room at Sovereign Structures headquarters offered a panoramic view of the Rocky Mountains, their peaks dusted with early December snow. Max sat alone at the head of the long walnut table, reviewing documents as he waited. Natalie arrived first, her usual confident poise replaced by barely concealed panic. Her Louboutins clicked nervously against the hardwood floor. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her designer outfit immaculate. Armor for the battle ahead. She'd applied makeup to disguise fatigue, but Max noted the strain around her eyes. Max, this is insane, she began immediately. You can't just. We'll wait for everyone to arrive, Max interrupted, not looking up from his papers. The door opened again as Brandon Webb entered, inappropriately dressed in distressed jeans and an expensive leather jacket. Behind him came Arnold Kessler, Natalie's attorney, a divorce specialist known for aggressive tactics against wealthy husbands. Mr. Reeves, Kessler said, extending his hand, which Max ignored. I believe we have some matters to discuss regarding your rash actions. Is Dylan joining us? Max asked Natalie. Dylan? Why would he? Her expression flickered with alarm. The door opened once more as Damon entered, followed by Leona Martinez. Natalie stiffened, recognizing the investigator from a charity event months earlier, where Max had introduced her simply as a consultant. Now we can begin, Max said, finally looking up. Over the next 20 minutes, Leona presented evidence of the affair with clinical precision. Photos, voice recordings, hotel receipts, text messages exchanged between Natalie and Brandon discussing their plans. You had me followed? Natalie hissed, color rising in her cheeks. That's prudent, Max finished for her, especially given this. He slid photocopies of bank statements across the table, transfers from Sovereign Structures accounts to the Webb studio, followed by transfers from the studio to offshore accounts established in Natalie's maiden name. Embezzlement carries significant penalties, Damon noted conversationally, as does conspiracy to commit fraud. Brandon paled. Natalie handled all that. I didn't know. Really? Max raised an eyebrow. That's not what you said at the Halcyon Hotel 2 nights ago. You seemed quite knowledgeable about the plan too. What was your phrase? Bleed the control freak dry? Leona produced a laptop, turning it to face them. The video showed Brandon and Natalie in the hotel room, not just in compromising positions, but discussing specific details of their financial scheme. That's an illegal recording, Kessler protested. Colorado is a one-party consent state for financial crimes investigations, Leona countered. And the hotel's terms of service explicitly permit room surveillance. Max stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Here's what happens next. Natalie, you'll vacate my house within 48 hours. You'll return all jewelry, artwork, and vehicles purchased during our marriage. You'll sign the divorce agreement Damon has prepared, which grants you a one-time settlement of $100,000, generous considering the circumstances. That's outrageous. Kessler sputtered. Mrs. Reeves is entitled to. Mrs. Reeves, Max continued coldly, is entitled to face criminal charges for embezzlement, conspiracy, and fraud. As is Mr. Webb. As is my stepson. Dylan has nothing to do with this, Natalie whispered, her facade cracking. Max slid another document across the table, emails from Dylan to Brandon containing confidential information about Sovereign Structure's clients and projects. He's been feeding you insider information for months. Information you've used to approach my clients with competing bids through shell companies. That's corporate espionage. Natalie's face crumpled. Max, please. We can work this out. We already have. Max nodded to Damon, who distributed copies of the divorce agreement. Sign, and the evidence of your crime stays private. Refuse, and it goes to the district attorney. You have 24 hours to decide. As they filed out, shocked and defeated, Max remained seated, gazing at the mountains. The first phase was complete, but this was merely the opening gambit. The real game was just beginning. Chapter 4. The Coalition. The sun had barely crested the Rockies when Max entered the Sovereign Club, the exclusive members-only establishment he'd founded 5 years earlier. The club occupied the entire top floor of one of his buildings, offering privacy to Denver's elite. Max nodded to the security staff as he made his way to the private dining room. 3 people awaited him. Vivian Reeves, his younger sister and Sovereign Structure's chief legal officer, Thomas Hargrove, his oldest friend and financial advisor, and Gabriel Diaz, a federal prosecutor turned private practice attorney specializing in white-collar crime. They signed, Max announced, taking his seat as a server silently poured his usual black coffee. All of them? Vivian asked, her expression mirroring her brother's intensity. Natalie and Webb signed the divorce and non-disclosure agreements last night. Dylan submitted his resignation this morning. Thomas whistled softly. That was faster than expected. Fear is efficient, Max replied, opening his laptop. But it's only the beginning. The screen displayed a complex flowchart, connections between Natalie, Brandon, Dylan, and a network of associates. At the center was a name, Lawrence Kincaid. Who's Kincaid? Gabriel asked, leaning forward. The puppet master, Max explained. Real estate developer from Chicago. I outbid him on the Meridian project last year. He's been targeting my projects ever since. Leona's investigation had uncovered communications between Kincaid and Brandon dating back 18 months. The affair with Natalie wasn't just about money. It was industrial sabotage. Kincaid had orchestrated their meeting, coached Brandon on how to seduce Natalie, all to gain access to Sovereign Structure's projects and intellectual property. Natalie was just a means to an end, Vivian observed. And Dylan? Thomas asked. Manipulated through his biological father, Max explained. Richard Hayes reappeared in Dylan's life last year after 15 years of absence. He works for Kincaid. Gabriel studied the documentation. This is corporate espionage, potentially federal wire fraud. I have contacts at the FBI who would be very interested. Not yet, Max cautioned. First, we dismantle Kincaid's operation from within. The criminal charges are our nuclear option. Over the next hour, they refined Max's strategy. Thomas would trace and freeze the offshore accounts where Natalie and Brandon had hidden the embezzled funds. Vivian would approach Sovereign Structure's clients who had been contacted by Kincaid's shell companies, building a civil case. Gabriel would prepare criminal complaints without filing them, leverage for later. What about your reputation? Vivian asked. Natalie has influential friends in the social scene. She'll spin this. Already handled, Max replied. Flynn Palmer owes me. Flynn Palmer owned Denver's leading media outlets. Max had financed his expansion years earlier when banks wouldn't touch him. Tomorrow's society pages would feature an exclusive on Natalie's affair and financial improprieties, portrayed as a betrayal of one of Denver's most respected business leaders. The court of public opinion would render its verdict before Natalie could control the narrative. As the meeting concluded, Max's phone chimed with a notification from his home security system. The cameras showed Natalie entering with a moving crew, attempting to remove artwork and furniture beyond what the agreement permitted. Right on schedule, Max noted, sending a pre-drafted text to the police officers waiting nearby. The agreement specified exactly what she could take. Anything else constituted theft. Thomas shook his head. You really anticipated everything. Almost everything, Max corrected. Kincaid is formidable. He won't go down without a fight. As if on cue, Max's phone rang with an unlisted number. He answered on speaker. Mr. Reeves, a smooth, Chicago-accented voice said. Lawrence Kincaid. I believe it's time we spoke directly. Max's eyes met Vivian's. The game was escalating faster than anticipated. Mr. Kincaid, Max replied evenly. I was just discussing your architecture of betrayal. I'm impressed by its intricacy, if not its originality. Kincaid chuckled. Direct and unflinching. I see your reputation is well earned. Perhaps we could meet? Competing serves neither of us when collaboration could be profitable. The Meridian Project isn't for sale. Everything has a price, Mr. Reeves. Even principles. Not mine, Max replied. But I admire your optimism. It takes courage to reach out when your pawns have been captured. A pause. Pawns are sacrificial by nature. The game has barely begun. Then I look forward to our next move, Max said, ending the call. The room remained silent for a moment before Gabriel spoke. He's threatening you. No, Max corrected. He's threatening someone close to me. That's his pattern. Max pulled up another file, a psychological profile of Kincaid compiled by Leona. The man targeted family connections, believing them to be weaknesses. He'd underestimated Max in that regard. Warn Beverly, Max told Vivian, referring to their mother. And increase security at your place. What about Natalie? Thomas asked. What about her? Max replied coldly. Chapter 5, The Betrayer's Gambit. Dylan Hayes sat in his Seattle apartment, staring at his laptop screen in disbelief. His bank accounts were empty. His credit cards declined. His access to Sovereign Structures systems revoked. His phone rang. His mother, calling for the 20th time today. He ignored it, focusing instead on the email that had arrived minutes earlier. Dylan, by now you understand the consequences of betrayal have begun. Your resignation has been accepted. Your personal belongings from the Seattle office will be delivered today. Your severance package is contingent upon your full cooperation in the ongoing investigation into Lawrence Kincaid's corporate espionage network. Your mother and Brandon Webb signed confessions implicating you in their scheme. Evidence of your involvement has been documented and secured. You have a choice to make. Contact my office by 5 p.m. Pacific time to arrange cooperation, or face the legal consequences independently. Maxwell Reeves. The doorbell rang. A courier delivered a box containing the framed architecture degree that had hung in Dylan's office, the model of his first building design, and the silver pin set Max had given him when he made junior partner. Dylan's hands trembled as he removed a sealed envelope from the box. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. This contains what your father never told you. Choose wisely. Plugging in the drive, Dylan found video recordings of meetings between Richard Hayes and Lawrence Kincaid, explicitly discussing using Dylan to access Sovereign Structures' proprietary information. In one, Richard laughed about how easily his son could be manipulated through daddy issues. As the truth crashed down around him, Dylan's phone chimed with a text, not from his mother, but from Richard. Damage control needed. Call now. Dylan stared at the message, suddenly seeing the pattern. After 15 years of absence, Richard had reappeared just after Dylan's promotion at Sovereign Structures. The emotional reconciliation, the late-night talks about feeling overshadowed by Max, the subtle suggestions about deserving more recognition. It had all been calculated. Meanwhile, across Denver, Natalie sat in Brandon's studio loft, surrounded by the few possessions she'd been permitted to remove from the mansion. Her phone buzzed with messages from former friends canceling lunch dates, charity boards requesting her resignation, social clubs reviewing her membership. They'll forget by next season, Brandon assured her, though his voice lacked conviction. People love a comeback story. Max doesn't forgive, Natalie replied hollowly. Ever. She'd witnessed it once before, when a business partner had attempted to leverage Max's designs without proper compensation. Max had systematically dismantled the man's company, reputation, and financial standing. He'd done it legally, methodically, and without apparent emotion. Lawrence said he'd handle Reeves, Brandon insisted, checking his phone again. Kincaid had stopped responding to messages yesterday. You still don't understand who you're dealing with, Natalie laughed bitterly. Lawrence uses people. Max destroys them. Her phone rang, an unknown number. Mrs. Reeves, a woman's voice said when Natalie answered. This is Andrea Morgan from First Western Bank. I'm calling about irregularities in your accounts. What irregularities? Large transfers to offshore accounts that have been flagged as suspicious. The funds have been frozen pending investigation. Given the amounts involved, we're required to file suspicious activity reports with FinCEN. Natalie's blood ran cold. FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. The federal government. These transfers appear to originate from Sovereign Structures accounts through Web Studio, the banker continued. Under federal regulations, we're obligated to notify all parties involved. The meaning was clear. Max knew about the offshore accounts. Worse, he'd ensured the banks knew too. After the call, Natalie turned to Brandon. Pack whatever you can carry. We need to leave. Now. Leave? We can't just. He's reporting us to federal authorities for money laundering, Natalie hissed. This isn't about divorce anymore. It's about prison. Brandon's face drained of color. Kincaid promised protection. Kincaid lied. Natalie snapped, grabbing her purse. Call him again. Brandon dialed, his hands shaking. This time, Kincaid answered. Mr. Webb, Kincaid said, his tone distant. I was just discussing your situation with my legal team. We need help, Brandon pleaded. Reeves is involving federal authorities. Yes, that's become apparent, Kincaid replied. Unfortunately, our arrangement has become untenable. The indemnification clause in our contract doesn't cover criminal fraud charges. Contract? What contract? Natalie demanded, grabbing the phone. Mrs. Reeves, Kincaid acknowledged smoothly. Surely you didn't think your husband was the actual target? Sovereign Structures' intellectual property was always the objective. Your relationship with Mr. Webb was merely a convenient vector. The line went dead. In that moment, Natalie understood with perfect clarity she hadn't been playing the game. She'd been a piece on someone else's board. Across town, Max received a call from Leona. They're running, she reported. Webb just booked 2 tickets to Cancun for tomorrow morning. Predictable, Max replied. Ensure our people are in position. Already done, Leona confirmed. What about Dylan? He's been researching whistleblower protections. The son begins to understand, Max noted. Keep monitoring. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Chapter 6, The Reckoning. The private dining room at the Sovereign Club had been transformed into a war room. Screens displayed surveillance feeds, financial trackers, and communications monitoring. Max stood at the center, orchestrating the endgame of a strategy months in the making. Webb and Natalie arrived at DN at 0530, Leona reported. TSA flagged them based on the FinCEN alerts. They're being detained for questioning. Secondary screening only, Max clarified. They still need to make their flight. Thomas entered, tablet in hand. Kincaid's making moves. Large cash withdrawals from 3 different banks. Private jet fueled and waiting at Chicago Executive Airport. He's preparing to disappear, Vivian observed. Let him run, Max replied. Fear makes people careless. On screen, they watched Brandon and Natalie being escorted to a private TSA room. Their expressions shifted from annoyance to alarm as agents began questioning them about the offshore transfers. They'll miss their flight, Gabriel noted. That's the point, Max explained. They need to believe they're trapped. The door opened, and Dylan Hayes entered, escorted by security. He looked haggard, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Max nodded to a chair, and Dylan sat without speaking. You reviewed the evidence, Max stated rather than asked. Yes, Dylan admitted. All of it, including what my father did. What Richard did, Max corrected. Fathers protect their children. Richard sold his. Dylan's expression hardened. I want to make it right. That's no longer possible, Max replied coldly. The damage is done. Then why am I here? Because Kincaid doesn't act alone, Max explained, pointing to a screen showing Richard Hayes entering a Chicago office building. Your father is meeting with Kincaid's investors right now, assuring them that despite recent setbacks, their plan to acquire Sovereign Structures' intellectual property remains viable. Dylan studied the surveillance image. You want me to testify against him? No, Max replied. I want you to replace him. The room fell silent as Max outlined his proposition. Dylan would contact Richard, claiming to have secured additional information from Sovereign Structures servers before being discovered. He would offer this fabricated evidence to Kincaid through Richard, positioning himself as a more valuable asset than his father. Why would I do this? Dylan asked. Because your alternatives are federal prison or permanent professional exile, Max replied without emotion. Corporate espionage carries a 20-year sentence. No architecture firm will hire you afterward. Your degree becomes worthless. And if I help you, you leave with enough to start over somewhere else. Not forgiveness. Practicality. Dylan considered briefly, then nodded. What's the play? As Dylan made the call to Richard, Max turned his attention back to Natalie and Brandon, who had been released by TSA but had missed their flight. Surveillance showed them arguing in the terminal, Brandon gesturing wildly while Natalie sat stone-faced. Interesting, Max observed. She's finally seeing him clearly. Thomas glanced at his longtime friend. Do you feel anything for her still? After 10 years. I feel the same for all of them, Max replied. Nothing. That afternoon, Lawrence Kincaid's carefully constructed world began unraveling with precision timing. The Chicago Tribune published an expose on his business practices, featuring testimony from former associates. The SEC announced an investigation into his company's accounting practices. 3 major banks called his outstanding loans. Simultaneously, Richard Hayes was arrested by FBI agents as he left his meeting, not for corporate espionage, but for an outstanding warrant from Nevada involving financial fraud from years earlier. The timing was not coincidental. Gabriel had ensured the warrant was prioritized today. By evening, Brandon had abandoned Natalie, checking into a different hotel after she refused to call her wealthy sister for help. Surveillance showed him desperately calling Kincaid's associates, all of whom declined his calls. He's running out of options, Leona noted. Good, Max replied. Tomorrow, he runs out of time. As the team dispersed for the night, Vivian lingered. Max, are you sure about this? Destroying these people so completely. They conspired to steal everything I've built, Max replied. They betrayed trust. They manipulated family. Would you suggest mercy? Not mercy, Vivian clarified. Perspective. When this is over, you still need to live with yourself. Max looked at his sister, his expression softening fractionally. I'll live quite comfortably with the knowledge that no one will mistake my principles for weakness again. The next morning, Max awakened to breaking news. Lawrence Kincaid's private jet had been denied departure clearance due to mechanical issues discovered during an unscheduled inspection. The timing aligned perfectly with an anonymous tip to aviation authorities about potential tampering. Phase 2 was nearing completion. The pieces were aligned for the final move. Chapter 7. The Collapse. Lawrence Kincaid considered himself a man who understood power. Real power, he believed, came not from wealth alone, but from knowing people's pressure points. For 20 years, he'd built his empire by identifying and exploiting weaknesses, which made his current situation all the more infuriating. What do you mean, frozen? He demanded, pacing his Chicago penthouse while his assistant cowered. I personally hold signing authority on those accounts. All accounts associated with Kincaid Enterprises have been temporarily restricted pending the SEC investigation, she explained again. The letter cites extraordinary circumstances justified by evidence of. I know what it says. Kincaid snapped, grabbing the legal notice. He'd read it 15 times already. The language was clear. His assets were inaccessible. His accounts suspended. His properties encumbered by temporary liens. All perfectly legal. All devastatingly thorough. His phone buzzed with a text from Richard Hayes. Arrested on old warrant. Need bail. Lawyer says you're named in affidavit. Before Kincaid could respond, another text arrived, from his wife Catherine. The club just revoked our membership. Board cited moral character clause. What's happening? Then his executive assistant appeared in the doorway, ashen-faced. Sir, the board is assembling for an emergency session. They're invoking the leadership contingency protocol. In other words, they were removing him as CEO. Kincaid sank into his chair, suddenly understanding what was happening. He wasn't facing a series of unfortunate coincidences. This was a coordinated assault, a systematic dismantling of everything he'd built. His phone rang, an unlisted number. "Reeves," he answered, his voice hoarse. "Mr. Kincaid," Max acknowledged. "I trust you're having an educational morning. How are you doing this?" "The same way you attempted to destroy me," Max replied. "Methodically, legally, completely." "Let's discuss terms," Kincaid proposed, desperation seeping into his voice. "Whatever Webb and the woman told you is extensively documented," Max interrupted, "including your personal instruction to target my family, my company, and my reputation." "This isn't business anymore," Kincaid realized aloud. "This is personal." "No, Mr. Kincaid. This is justice. You weaponized my marriage, used my stepson, attempted to steal my life's work." Max's voice remained perfectly controlled. "Actions have consequences. Name your price." "Interesting that you still believe this is a negotiation," Max replied. "Check your email in 30 minutes. The terms of your surrender will be clearly outlined. You have 2 hours to comply." The line went dead. Precisely 30 minutes later, Kincaid received a document so comprehensive in its demands that it left no doubt about his complete capitulation. He would resign from his company, transfer controlling interest in his most valuable properties to a trust administered by Max's associates, make public admissions of his attempts at corporate espionage, cut all contact with Brandon Webb, Natalie Reeves, Richard Hayes, and a dozen other co-conspirators. The alternative was explicit: federal prosecution for wire fraud, corporate espionage, conspiracy, money laundering, and securities violations. The evidence outlined in the appendix was meticulous. Kincaid had no choice. He signed. Across Denver, Natalie sat alone in her sister's guest room, scrolling through social media where she'd been transformed from socialite to pariah overnight. Her calls went unanswered, her messages unread. Former friends posted thinly veiled references to loyalty and karma. Her sister Pamela entered without knocking. "You need to leave." Natalie looked up, startled. "What?" "Max called Preston," Pamela explained, referring to her husband. Explained everything. "Preston's law firm represents 3 of Sovereign Structure's biggest clients. He can't have you here." "I'm your sister," Natalie protested weakly. "And you tried to destroy the man who helped finance Preston's partnership track," Pamela countered. "You have 2 hours." As Pamela left, Natalie's phone pinged with an email from Max's attorney. The subject line read simply, "Final communication." The message contained a document outlining her complete excommunication from Denver society. Anyone maintaining business or social relationships with her would lose access to Sovereign Structure's properties, which included most premium commercial real estate in the city. Max had leveraged his influence to ensure she would be unwelcome in the community they'd shared. The final paragraph informed her that a one-way ticket to Minneapolis had been purchased in her name. She could return to the modest neighborhood she'd spent years pretending she hadn't come from. Across town, Brandon Webb arrived at his studio to find the locks changed and a notice of eviction posted on the door. His key fob no longer worked. Through the glass, he could see his workspace had been cleared, sculptures removed, tools gone, materials missing. His phone rang, his gallery representative. "Brandon, I can't represent you anymore," she said without preamble. "Every collector in Colorado has blacklisted your work." "This is insane," Brandon exploded. "He can't just—" "He already has," she interrupted. "Max Reeves just acquired the building your studio is in, and my gallery, and the condo you're staying in." Brandon felt the blood drain from his face. "That's impossible. He couldn't buy everything overnight." "He didn't," she explained with exasperation. "He's owned them through subsidiaries for years. He's the silent partner behind half the arts district. Always has been." The revelation hit Brandon like a physical blow. He hadn't just betrayed a wealthy businessman. He'd betrayed the hidden patron who had inadvertently enabled his entire career. By evening, the coordinated destruction of the conspirators was complete. Richard Hayes remained in custody, denied bail after evidence emerged linking him to additional financial crimes. Brandon Webb found himself locked out of not just his studio, but his apartment, bank accounts, and social circles. Natalie boarded her flight to Minneapolis, reduced to the single suitcase she'd packed for her aborted escape to Mexico. As the plane took off, she received one final text from an unknown number. Consequences. Nothing more. In his home office, Max reviewed the reports from his team. Every target neutralized. Every betrayal answered. Leona's surveillance confirmed his instructions had been followed precisely. Harshly punitive, but entirely legal. The game was effectively over. He poured himself a measure of bourbon and gazed out at the mountains. The victory felt exactly as he'd expected. Not joyful, not triumphant, but righteous. Justice served coldly, without mercy but also without excess. His phone buzzed with a message from Vivian. It's done. Call if you need company. Max considered briefly, then declined. Tonight was for reflection, not celebration. Tomorrow would begin the process of rebuilding. Not the life he'd had, which was irrevocably altered, but something new. Something stronger, forged in betrayal's fire and tempered by retribution. The lesson had been delivered. Those who had participated would never forget it. Neither would he. Chapter 8. The Inheritance. 3 months after what Denver business circles now referred to simply as the Reeves situation, Max sat in his office reviewing the final settlement reports. Lawrence Kincaid had resigned from his company and moved to Arizona. His reputation and influence diminished beyond recovery. Brandon Webb had fled to Portland, unable to secure gallery representation or commissions. Natalie was working as a department store sales associate in Minneapolis. Her reinvention as a humble working woman featured ironically in a local newspaper. Only Dylan's fate remained unresolved. He's here, Vivian announced from the doorway. Max nodded, closing his laptop. Send him in. Dylan entered, noticeably changed from their last meeting. The entitled arrogance had vanished, replaced by a wary humility. He'd lost weight. His designer clothes had been exchanged for simpler attire. The transformation seemed genuine rather than performative. Thank you for seeing me, Dylan said, taking the offered seat. Your information proved valuable, Max acknowledged, referencing Dylan's role in providing evidence against Kincaid and Richard. Gabriel tells me the federal case is proceeding as expected. My father took a plea deal, Dylan confirmed. 15 years. No possibility of early release. Max studied his former stepson. Despite everything, he recognized something in Dylan that had once existed in himself, the potential for rehabilitation through harsh consequence. Why are you here? Max asked directly. Dylan placed a thumb drive on the desk. To return what I took. The client files, project plans, everything. I've deleted all other copies. Leona already recovered those months ago, Max noted. Try again. To apologize, Dylan said after a moment. Not to ask forgiveness. I know that's impossible. But to acknowledge what I did. The trust one betrayed. Max considered this. And then I leave. Start over somewhere else. Architecture is finished for me. I understand that. Max opened his desk drawer and removed a folder. Your degree is in sustainable urban planning as well as architecture. Your thesis on affordable housing integration was genuinely innovative. Dylan looked surprised that Max had bothered to know this. Sovereign Structures is establishing a nonprofit foundation focused on developing housing solutions for underserved communities, Max continued, sliding the folder across the desk. The Maxwell Reeves Foundation needs a project coordinator with relevant education. The position pays modestly and requires relocation to Detroit. Dylan stared at the folder without touching it. Why would you offer me anything? Not forgiveness, Max clarified. Pragmatism. Your talents shouldn't be wasted, and your debt to society is better paid through service than exile. My mother is not part of this discussion, Max interrupted firmly. Your relationship with her is your concern. Your professional future is the only matter I'm addressing. Dylan finally took the folder. I don't deserve this. No, Max agreed coldly. You don't. But deserve has nothing to do with it. This is about utility. Prove yourself useful, and the foundation benefits. Fail again, and no one will offer you another chance. After Dylan left, Vivian entered with coffee. You're giving him a second chance. I'm allocating resources efficiently, Max corrected. His skills have value if properly directed. Mom would approve, Vivian noted with a small smile. She always said you had more capacity for forgiveness than you admitted. It isn't forgiveness, Max insisted. It's practical. Vivian's expression remained skeptical. And Natalie? Will you ever? No, Max cut her off, his tone brooking no argument. Some betrayals cannot be forgiven or forgotten. Dylan was young, manipulated by his father and Kincaid. Natalie chose her path with full awareness of the consequences. The distinction matters. That evening, Max visited their mother Beverly at her assisted living facility. At 78, she remained sharp-minded despite her physical frailty. After cancer had taken their father when Max was 15, Beverly had worked double shifts as a nurse to support her children. She'd taught them resilience and principle by example. "You look troubled," Beverly observed as they sat in the facility's garden. "Thoughtful, not troubled," Max corrected. "The Dylan situation is resolved." Beverly nodded. "You gave him the foundation position. How did you know?" "Because beneath all that steel and stone you've built around yourself, you're still the boy who believed in second chances," she replied simply. "One mistake doesn't define a life. That's what your father always said." "This was more than one mistake," Max pointed out. "Yes," Beverly acknowledged. "But you measured his actions against his character and found room for redemption. That's wisdom, Maxwell. Don't dismiss it as mere practicality." Max didn't argue, though he maintained his position internally. Dylan's opportunity wasn't forgiveness. It was a calculated decision based on potential return. Nothing more. As Max drove home, his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He answered through the car system. "Mr. Reeves," a familiar voice said. "Pamela Richardson, Natalie's sister." "Interesting. Mrs. Richardson," Max acknowledged. "What can I do for you?" "Natalie is struggling," she began hesitantly. "The situation in Minneapolis is entirely of her own making," Max interrupted. "I understand that," Pamela continued. "But she's still my sister. She's learned her lesson, Max. She's truly remorseful." "I'm sure she's remorseful about the consequences," Max replied coldly. "That's not the same as remorse for the actions." "She's family," Pamela pressed. "Doesn't that count for something?" "Family doesn't betray family," Max stated with finality. "Natalie made her choice. Now she lives with it." After ending the call, Max reflected on the request. Unlike with Dylan, he felt no inclination toward leniency with Natalie. The difference was fundamental. Dylan had been misled by his father. Natalie had orchestrated her betrayal independently, with clear intention and malice. Some debts could never be repaid. Some bridges, once burned, would never be rebuilt. As he entered his home, redesigned and renovated to remove all traces of Natalie's presence, Max felt the rightness of his decision. The matter was closed. Justice had been served. Life would continue, without forgiveness, without compromise, without weakness, as it always had. Chapter 9, The Sovereign. 1 year later, Maxwell Reeves stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his new penthouse, surveying the city he'd helped shape. Denver's skyline featured a dozen buildings he'd designed, their architectural signatures unmistakable, bold, innovative, uncompromising. Like their creator. Behind him, the executive team of Sovereign Structures waited at the conference table. Today marked the company's 20th anniversary and the unveiling of their most ambitious project yet, Sovereign Tower, a revolutionary mixed-use skyscraper combining sustainable technology with cutting-edge design. "The board has unanimously approved the expansion," Vivian announced, sliding documents toward him. "New offices in Seattle, Chicago, and Austin." Max reviewed the paperwork with satisfaction. The past year had been Sovereign Structures' most profitable ever. The vacuum left by Kincaid Enterprises' implosion had created opportunities Max had seized decisively. "What about Detroit?" he asked. Thomas brought up the Foundation's quarterly report on his tablet. "The affordable housing initiative has exceeded projections. Dylan's management has been surprisingly effective." Max nodded, unsurprised. Dylan had approached his redemption with the same intensity he'd once applied to betrayal. Monthly reports showed exemplary performance, innovative solutions to budget constraints, and genuine commitment to the Foundation's mission. "And the other matters?" Max inquired. Leona activated the room's privacy protocol before responding. "Natalie has remarried. Minneapolis bank manager, modest means. Brandon Webb is working as an art teacher at a community college in Oregon. Lawrence Kincaid's health has deteriorated significantly. His doctors give him less than a year." Max absorbed this information without visible reaction. Their fates no longer concerned him beyond confirmation that justice remained in effect. "What about Richard Hayes?" Max asked. Still serving his sentence, Leona confirmed. No possibility of parole until 2039. The meeting proceeded with discussions of new projects, client acquisitions, and strategic growth. As it concluded, Gabriel remained behind. There's one other item, the attorney said, placing a thick envelope on the table. Natalie's new husband adopted her legal surname. They're requesting permission to use the Reeves name for their new child. Max stared at the envelope, momentarily taken aback. She's pregnant? Due in February, Gabriel confirmed. The request came through formal legal channels. Max considered this unexpected development. Natalie seeking permission rather than forgiveness represented a significant shift. The humility required to make such a request spoke to how completely she understood her position. After a moment, he reached for his fountain pen and drafted a brief response on his personal stationery. Request denied. The Reeves name is earned, not granted. He sealed the note in an envelope and handed it to Gabriel. Ensure this is delivered personally, not through intermediaries. That evening, Max hosted a small dinner at the Sovereign Club for his inner circle: Vivian, Thomas, Gabriel, Leona, and a few trusted associates. The conversation flowed easily, touching on business developments, community initiatives, and future plans. No mention was made of past betrayals or executed vengeance. Those chapters were closed. After dinner, Max found himself alone on the club's terrace, gazing at the city lights. Vivian joined him, offering a glass of their father's favorite bourbon. 20 years, she remarked. Dad would be proud. Max accepted the drink with a nod. He valued integrity above all else. And justice, Vivian added. Though he might have questioned your definition of it this past year. Justice without consequence is merely sentiment, Max replied. He taught us that. They stood in companionable silence until Vivian asked the question she'd been holding back for months. Do you ever regret how completely you destroyed them? Max considered this carefully. Regret implies I would choose differently given another opportunity. I wouldn't. Not even with Dylan. Dylan earned his second chance through usefulness, Max maintained. The others did not. Vivian studied her brother. The unyielding posture, the unwavering certainty. You know, most people would have been broken by what happened. The betrayal, the conspiracy, the personal nature of it. I wasn't broken because I understood something they didn't, Max explained. Trust is valuable, but verification is essential. I never trusted completely, not Natalie, not Brandon, not even Dylan. I maintained sovereignty over my emotions, my decisions, my future. The sovereign, Vivian mused with a small smile. Is that why you named everything that way? The company, the club, now the tower? A reminder, Max confirmed. We govern ourselves, or others govern us. There is no middle ground. As they rejoined the gathering, Max reflected on the journey of the past 18 months. From the moment he'd heard Natalie's voicemail to this night of quiet triumph, he had remained in control of his reactions, his strategy, his justice. He had not forgiven. He had not forgotten. He had not compromised his principles for sentiment or conventional morality. And he never would. The betrayers had learned their lesson. Maxwell Reeves had reinforced his. In the architecture of life, as in his buildings, integrity of structure was everything. Remove a supporting principle, and the entire edifice risked collapse. Max had not merely survived betrayal. He had transformed it into the foundation of a stronger empire. An empire built on an immutable truth. True power came not from wealth or connection, but from absolute sovereignty over oneself. That was his legacy. That was his victory. Complete. Uncompromising. Sovereign. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.